I'm very pleased to introduce our speakers for today. We have Sheila Rubin and Brett Lyon. They have co-led groups on healing shame in many cities in the US and Canada, including New York, Toronto, Phoenix, and Minneapolis. Both have trained in EFT with Sue Johnson and AEDP with Diana Fosha. Sheila is a marriage and family therapist and registered drama therapist who integrates somatic, expressive, and attachment modalities to work with couples, adults, and children who have shame and trauma. She's trained also in Hakomi. Sheila is an alumni of the CIIS Drama Therapy Program and is an adjunct faculty at CIIS and JFK. Brett has been a consultant teacher of somatic and emotional mindfulness for over 25 years, and he holds doctorates in both psychology and drama. He's certified in focusing and somatic experiencing, and he's trained extensively in Reiki and breathwork. Brett is a board-certified coach. So I'm very happy to have them both here. Thank you.
Hello. It's really nice to be back here. I feel like one of those nightclub comedians, great to be back in Santa Rosa. But actually, this is my favorite place to speak. I've been here. This is my 5th time. You're gluttons for punishment. You've invited me. But this is the first time that I've gotten to bring Sheila with me. And Sheila's my wife. We have a dynamic, as you will see. And
we like to interrupt each other.
Yeah.
Probably help. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Sometimes we talk over each other's sentences and interrupt each other.
But it's all in good, clean fun until we get home, and then it's different. So I also wanted to make sure we've been. It's really like we're very, very blessed, and we've been doing this healing shame work. I think it's about eight years now. And it's really taken off, and so we're being invited places. They love us for some reason in Canada. That's our big place. So we're getting 80, 90 people at a workshop in Canada, and we're really passing the work on. And about a little over a year ago, we decided to move from just doing workshops to doing a full training program. And we have here in this room 3 people who are certified practitioners of healing shame. And if you guys would stand up for a minute, it's Gail and Lainey and Barbara. And Deborah is very close now. She's still getting there. So they're here, and in terms of consult, or if you want to talk to someone about a shame issue with your client, they're right here in town, and of course we're open to consults. And what we found is shame in many ways is the master emotion, and it's pretty well underlies pretty much everything, at least that's our belief around it. And it's not something you learn a lot about in therapy school. How many people had a workshop, a course on shame in their graduate program? You see all the hands, right? So I got one.
Yeah, nice.
Incredible, yeah. So it's very rare, and so.
How about postgraduate training in shame? How many people have done some?
Yeah, a
Good.
little bit. Good.
Good.
Mostly when we ask this question, it's our people who raise their hands, because they've been with us for a while. So today we're going to focus on shame in couples, and as Sheila told me in no uncertain terms, she's the lead on this one, because Sheila does a lot more work with couples than I do, and my work is more with individuals. I see a lot of men who are referred by couples therapists to me. That's the way I get more into couples work. But Sheila works a lot with couples, and so she'll be leading this. And but obviously shame applies to everybody. And the issue with couples is that people bring shame into the relationship, and then they manage to shame each other. So you get what Sheila will call the blame-shame game that happens. So we'll be looking at how to diffuse that, and also a little bit as to how to go back and look at the childhood shaming that led to the kind of mess that people get themselves into. And we certainly are examples of that.
Yeah,
so.
And we're also going to talk a little bit about our dynamic. And then I'm going to do a role play that is scripted, and it's a session that I did with a couple. And I'm just wondering if there's anybody here who has any theater training or who might be willing to, in about a half hour, get up here and be part of a couple. Anybody interested? Oh,
we got the couple
hands.
right there. Okay.
Great. So in
you
about a half
on.
hour, when I call you guys up, come on up here. Thank you. What are your names? Bob and Juanita. Wonderful, wonderful.
Great.
A match made in heaven.
Yes, and this is going to be filmed. It'll be on YouTube right after the.
So can I
So
see
you go
hands?
ahead.
Thank
I'm gonna
you.
leave it to you for
Thank
a while.
you, honey.
I'll be interrupting from time to time.
How many of you work with couples? Oh, great, great, great. And how many of you love it when you can get through and get them loving and connected again? How many of you is that like really wonderful? Great. And then how many of you have the opposite experience a lot of the time where you were just headed for that repair and you were just headed for the, oh, I love you so much, and instead somebody says, but why did you not do that last year? And everything goes out the door. Yeah. And then they're triggered again, and all hell breaks loose. So there's a missing piece to the couples therapy, and it has to do with how easily a little misattunement, a little misunderstanding, a little something can just create shame. And so I'm calling this, besides working with couples and shame, I'm also calling this the dreaded S word. You know, the dreaded S word is shame. We don't want to talk about it. Clients don't want to talk about it. And sometimes therapists don't want to go near it because they're afraid of shaming their clients. So in this talk today, I'm going to talk about that there's pursuers and there's withdrawers. In our relationship, Brett is the pursuer, and he pursues, and he keeps, when are we going to do this? When are we going to do this? When are we going to do this? And I withdraw, and I'm like, let me think about it. Give me a little time. Let me, and when he withdraws, then when I withdraw, he pursues even further, so I withdraw even further. And that's part of our dynamic. But it helps to understand the pursuer shame and the withdrawer shame, because there's a shame in both of those roles. How many of you have done emotionally focused therapy or know about emotionally focused therapy? Great. These are Sue Johnson's concepts of the pursuers and the withdrawers. And I see the shame in the sessions so often. So could we have the next slide? Thank you so much. I don't know. There we are. So you did it. So John Bowlby says that we perceive who we are through the eyes of those we love. And when we're in a couple, guess what? That's the other person. That's who we love. So we're perceiving who we are through their eyes. And we're also on this shame, continuum throughout life of being seen as self at best or being seen as self at worst. And so we're trying to stay out of shame at all costs, especially through the eyes of the person we love. So what happens in a relationship? Can we have the next slide? The pursuer, you don't even need to know what the word's on there, but what do you see in this slide? What do people see in this slide? Oversharing and undersharing. So there's one person who has a lot of passion, a lot of words, a lot of information, a lot of content, and some things the other person doesn't quite meet up. And do you want to come up and be the pursuer? Let me talk about the shame. How about the next slide? What the pursuers will say, this is how you know who's the pursuer in the session. They're secretly thinking inside, or they actually come in and they say, what's wrong with them?
It's not secretly, no, we're not doing it secretly.
They're the ones that call and they say, fix my husband, fix my wife, there's something wrong with them. Or they say, I'm so alone, is he or she ever going to be there for me? And ultimately, do I matter? So it's an attachment issue that the pursuer is pursuing, and then when they're not met, they may say these things, and the next slide underneath is the shame, and the shame may show up as what's wrong with them, but underneath secretly is what's wrong with me. Or they say, why am I always alone in this relationship? And underneath is, what's wrong with me that I would be somebody, with somebody that can't meet my needs, somebody like this. And often they'll say, I never get my needs met in this relationship. So Brett is going to demonstrate how we figured out that he was the pursuer when we were in early dating. We're married now. This was a long
we've been
time
married.
ago.
We can't remember how many years. That's an interesting place to be. We know the date of the wedding,
April
but not
13th.
April 13th, but we don't remember the year. We're going to go look it up. We're going to look at our marriage license and find
2008,
out.
We don't know.
What I found myself doing, and this is my third marriage, and what I found myself doing, well, let me put it this way. Most of my friends, all of my friends, have never seen me angry. This is not the case with my wife or my ex-wives, okay? And there's something that tends to get me angry. And I went to a therapist who's a very good therapist, and he said, isn't there something that happens before you get angry? And I said, no, nothing happens. I just get angry. And he dropped it. And that was the end of the discussion. And we never got to what it was. And so I ended up doing a lot of work on my own. And I had a client who, we couldn't get her better. She wasn't getting better. Anyone have a client like that? Yeah, no, of course not. So finally we thought, well, maybe it's a shame issue. I didn't even know what that meant. But maybe it's a shame issue. And I started reading about shame. And what I realized is it applied to me. And I started to understand, kind of how the shame for men particularly is under the anger. How men go, it's called a reaction to shame. We'll show you a chart later. That you go from your own shame to attacking the other person. It's kind of like putting a hot potato on another person because you don't want it. So once I realized that, I forgot one part that was important. The reason I did all this is because she broke up with me. We were going out, and she said, I just can't take it anymore. You're like, it would be okay if you were always, maybe it wouldn't be okay, but I could handle it better if you were always a bad guy. She didn't use bad guy, but if you were always, but you're so nice and you know what I mean, right? So you're so nice and you're so compassionate. I'm a very sensitive man, until I get triggered. And so you're sensitive and you're compassionate, and then all of a sudden it flips, and I feel like I've been emotionally, not physically, but emotionally punched in the stomach, and I just can't handle it anymore. And that's what kind of got me on the search and led me to this discovery of shame. And when I realized that there was shame there, I realized that she'd be crazy to get back with me until I got some handle on it, because I had no control over it. It was just, which is how shame works. It kind of takes you over. So I worked on it for quite a while, and then I realized that the only way I could get her back, because she was pretty adamant, we were still staying friends, but she was pretty adamant that that's how we were going to be. And I even had my aunt call her up and plead on my behalf. And she said, thank you very much, but no, she's kind of like a substitute mother to me.
Yeah. Your Aunt Daisy said.
Aunt Daisy, yeah.
Brett's mom is not here anymore, so I'm calling
Daisy felt like
on behalf of the family that he's so much happier with you.
Right. Anyway, she says she still said no, and I realized that the only way I was really going to get her attention was to ask her to marry me. And I called a friend of mine who is actually kind of a misogynistic guy. In fact, he has a lot of trouble with women. In fact, he has trouble with everybody, but women especially. And I said, I'm thinking of asking her to marry me. He said, that's a great idea. I said, what, you're telling me it's a great idea to ask a woman to marry me? He said, yeah, she's never going to accept. She's going to tell you that you have to go to couples counseling. You'll have plenty of time to decide if you want to actually marry her or not. So that's what happened. And that's my part of the story.
Thanks, honey.
Yeah.
So Brett thinks that he discovered shame, but I actually knew quite a bit about shame by the time I got into the relationship. So let's go to the next slide. And I was the withdrawer in the relationship. And what is going on for the withdrawer in the relationship? This, I just have to read this. I can't talk to that little red girl. I can't talk to that little red-haired girl because she's something and I'm nothing. If I were something and she was nothing, well, then I could talk to her. Or if she were nothing and I was nothing, then I could also talk to her. But I'm nothing, so I can't talk to her. And Linus, of course, says for somebody who's nothing, you've got a lot going on. So this is the position of the withdrawer. The withdrawer is kind of living in this place of not enough or not even mattering. So if you push the next slide, to anybody familiar with that slide? Anybody familiar, have clients that are like that are just kind of, yeah. So withdrawers' shame may show up as, what's wrong with me? I have to hide so my partner doesn't know how terrible I am. Or I'm confused and I don't know what I feel, therefore something's very wrong with me. So, and then this is, this is, oh, go back one slide. Yeah, thank you. I want to stay here for a little bit. I want to tell a little bit about my story. I was a wild and wonderful kid until, some things happened in my family. And I learned that in our family, because of the dynamic between my parents and my mother's mental illness, I just learned to kind of like keep everything that was weird at home. I just kind of kept it at home, and I learned that I went to school and I found out that I was smart, but they just kept saying that's Sheila and she's shy. So I thought, okay, I'm shy. I don't know what that means exactly, but okay. It's a way to explain something about me. But I knew that I was always watching people, and I was always kind of like looking at people and looking down a lot, and and some bullying happened in school, and I just, I sort of figured out, okay, whatever this shy thing is, I need to find some other way around it. And what do Jewish kids do who are shy? How do they get out of it? Anybody know? Right, they've got to become doctors or lawyers. But yeah, I became a therapist. But as a kid, I started practicing magic because it was the one thing I had a little bit control over, and I would tear up pieces of paper and stuff them in one sleeve and pull out a piece of paper from the other sleeve and restore it. And, and then I went to the magic show. My sister and I were the magic sisters, and we learned how to be magicians, and we learned how to do amazing tricks. I made Michelle Bloch disappear, and, I would perform for my class, so I would, be this little shy, kid, and then I would just do this magic, and they would say, how do you do that? And I would say, I can't tell you. So I would be shy again. But eventually, I learned my way through it. Eventually, I became a therapist. Eventually, I learned so much about this shyness thing in myself that when I was working as the eating disorder specialist at Mills Peninsula Hospital, and even before that, people would say, how do you know how to work with these women who have these horrible eating disorders? Nobody knows how to, fix it. And I said, I don't know how I know that, but I understand the inner critic. I understand that something's wrong with me. I understand that dynamic. And so I realized that I understood it from my own shyness, which now I know is also on the shame continuum. And so that shyness was a real way that I processed shame, and I kind of, held that feeling of shame. So as I was working with these women and other people in the hospital, I had a lot of good results, and I felt like, wow, I've really figured out how to do therapy. I've really figured out how to, and I was president of a couple local therapist organizations, and around that time, I started thinking, okay, I've figured out how to be a really good therapist, and I'm a little lonely, so now maybe it was time to be in a relationship. So all of a sudden there was Brett in my life. He was amazing. I fell in love with him. But a very strange thing happened. I started feeling shy again. And I started feeling, he would start putting me down. He would start saying negative things about me. He would just, get mad for things that I couldn't even understand why. And he would start blaming me for things. And when he would blame me, I would feel this shame. And then when I felt the shame, I would pull away. So he would pursue more. I would withdraw more. He would pursue more. I would withdraw more. And so by the time we actually started teaching the healing shame workshops, he said, "I've figured out about shame." And I said, "Well, actually, honey, you figured out about, male shame. And I actually know about female shame, which is not hidden at all. And it's kind of very all pervasive and out there." So we learned how to teach about shame. Next slide. And so as a therapist, what I help my clients do and my students do is talk about the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room, as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't matter if there's been a misattunement of attention or an affair. The misattunement, there is something always about what does this mean about me. So the elephant in the room is shame. And so I help couples talk about shame. Next slide. So shame is so profoundly uncomfortable. Our nervous systems can't stay in it for very long. So most people aren't very aware of it. It can be invisible. And what we actually see are our reactions to shame. And there's 4 reactions to shame: attack self, attack other, deny, and withdraw. Do you want to come up for this part, honey? The next slide. Oh, wait a minute. Shame is the breaking of the interpersonal bridge. So, and then we're getting beyond the blame-shame game. And the next is the reactions to shame. Because if this is our view of self in relation to the world, we need to be able to know if one person in the couple is feeling like this, we need to be ready for it in the couple session.
Read what it says.
It says view of self in relation to the world, and we see Leo looking at the stars, all the stars, and he's looking out at these amazing stars, this wondrous thing. And what does he think he hears from the stars? It's the stars form into, what are you looking at, butthead? So that's what the stars, the amazing stars, that is the message he's getting.
It's a version of who do you think you are?
And he walks away dejected. So this can happen in a second in a therapy session, especially with a couple. So we need to be aware of shame and then specifically the reactions to shame, which is the next slide.
So people bring shame into
One
the
more.
relationship.
Yep. Yeah, keep going. Keep going.
Yeah.
One more.
No, you're missing.
Oh, sorry,
You're
keep
still
going.
missing it, Sheila.
going.
It's still not in there. We're going to have to do
I
it.
think it's in there. Keep going.
It's supposed to
going.
be
There it
there.
is.
Oh, wonderful. Look at that. Wow.
We have a genius here.
Yeah. We were
Genius
missing
behind
this
the
one
camera.
slide and we
Yeah.
found it. Okay,
So
so
go for it.
yeah, people. What am I doing? This chart?
Reactions to shame. Yeah.
Okay, I'm doing
Yeah.
it. Good. I didn't know this. Thank you. Sweet. Yeah. I get to be up here. Okay. So basically, people bring shame into the relationship, and then they trigger each other. So what we've got is a lot of shame triggers. So something that's very small or seems very small to the partner doing it is very big to the other partner because it's triggering from the past. The way I tell my clients is you've got the 10% in the present and you've got 90% from the past. Am I tripping on it? Okay. Yeah, thank you. I'll be careful. That'll be my shame when I fall flat on my face and bring this thing down with me. So shame, because it's so painful to feel, we react to it in different ways, and there are kind of 4 directions of reaction. And this is a chart we built on and developed from Donald Nathanson. And basically, we can either attack self, which is more the withdraw position, the what's wrong with me. We can attack other, which is much more my position was, and it tends to be a male position. It can go either way, but this is the pursuer. And that's the attack self is where you go into the inner critic, you get perfectionism, you you go into there's something wrong with me, I deserved it, whatever I got I deserved, I'm toxic, I'm bad. Those kind of things go on within the individual. The attack other is another approach, which is I don't want to feel this, it's not me who's bad, it's you who's bad. So you got that wonderful pointing finger. And that's where you've got blame and criticism, passing the hot potato, contempt, and ultimately can lead to domestic violence. And for whatever reason, these two tend to marry each other.
Yeah, I don't know
So,
why.
yeah. So you do have, you do occasionally have two pursuers or two withdrawers, but in general, it splits. You get a pursuer and a withdrawer, and they don't have to be, the pursuer can also be an attack self, but you've got this pattern going on.
And
There-
what happened with Brett and I is when he would do the attack other and just blame or criticize something, I would just kind of turn and attack myself and go, well, wait a minute, didn't I learn that already? And I would read more books, take more courses, So I would be with my inner critic, and then the more I was doing that, the more he was pursuing with the blaming.
Right, and for the pursuer and the attack other, there's a deep feeling of unlovability that, for the pursuer, it's more this feeling of abandonment and loneliness that relates to the shame, because they're both part of shame. Isolation is part of shame. And for the withdrawer, it's a feeling of incompetence. I'm not good enough, I don't know how to do this, I can't get it right. Now, underneath one is the other. It's all there, but those are the basic ones. Now, the two other approaches, one is to deny, and that's where people go into dissociation, numbness, blankness. I'm sure you've worked with some clients where they kind of leave their body as they're trying to do their work. And then some people like myself don't need drugs to do that, but some people do, and so they take drugs, alcohol, sex, food, and the places it really didn't happen or it wasn't so bad. And that's where you get, yeah, my father beat me, but it made a man out of me, that kind of thing. That's a denial mechanism. And then there's a subhead on that I developed, which is fawn and cling, which you see a lot. We work a lot with foster families, and you see this a lot with the foster and the adopted children, where they're still clinging to the abusive birth parent who neglected them, rejected them, or maybe beat them. And the foster parent or the adopted parent, why is he so wrapped up in his mother? Why is he so wrapped worrying about his father? Well, there's this cling mechanism where we try to keep the relationship no matter what. And in order to do that, the access to anger is frozen. So you get that, okay? And then finally, there's the withdraw, and the withdraw is different from the deny. In the deny, you stay in the situation and you pretend it's not happening, right? In the withdraw, you actually leave the situation. You withdraw from it. You pull away from it. And this relates to the withdrawer as well. I can't stand what's going on. I know it's going on, but I'm going to pull away from it. And so what happens to move from this term to the EFT terms, when the pursuer pursues more, and pursuers, it's also the pursuer blamer. Pursuers pursue a lot by blaming because they're actually they get quickly into an attack other. I'm feeling abandoned and alone, and if you would just pay more attention to me or do what I want you to do, then I'd feel better. So why don't you do it? I understand that. So the withdrawal pulls away, licks wounds, reassesses, and then if they don't do something else, they start going down the rabbit hole into isolation and mistrust, and finally losing faith and hope. And that's where you get, people who've really
Suicide
withdrawn.
can happen with the withdrawal, yes.
So I have a client that I'm working with right now who has a history of trauma, and she gets like ragefully angry and then attacks herself.
Right.
And she's in a relationship and her partner is just like, time to go to therapy.
Good.
So they don't get into it together so much.
Good.
Right.
Because she just
Yeah.
gets
Yeah.
in it herself.
Yeah. Well,
And
you've got an
this
unusually
is-
good partner there
Yeah.
because he or she doesn't get into it with her. But what she's going through is down the rabbit hole, and she's moving through a lot of these. Yeah.
And what happens in therapy is a lot of us were dealing with just the attack self or just the attack other, or we're dealing with these reactions. And it's helpful to get at what is this shame in the center? What is the thing that caused it? And finding a way to get to that. So it's good that they're coming in to do work.
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, and trauma always leads to shame because shame is related to feelings of incompetence and impotence and helplessness and not being able to function. And so there's always shame in trauma. And it's very important. A lot of the trauma disciplines don't, from our point of view, don't stress shame enough. I actually have a client I'm working with who came to me for some shame work and had a trauma therapist who, whenever she would bring up shame, would say, "Can you put that aside?" Well, you can't put it aside. It's the essence of the problem.
Right.
If something bad happens to you, a lot of times it's not when you go to T0, the moment of real heavy trauma. It's the moment when you tried to tell somebody and they didn't believe you, or they didn't listen to you, or they dismissed your concerns. It's actually the moment of shame. So we want to move on to couples.
Right, and so
then we'll have time for
basically,
questions at the end. Yeah.
when this, if this is the map, I always have this as one of the maps in my head. So when this is the map and something happens in the couple session, I'm trying to figure out what just happened, and I might just stop them if suddenly, there's a blame shame game suddenly taking root in the couple session. I will say something and I'll say, wait a minute, you guys, what just happened? Because all of a sudden we were talking very quietly, and then you said something about not putting the car away over the weekend, and all of a sudden, there was, the intensity came up, and, what happened, in that moment, and I'm looking for what happened. Did somebody feel put down? Did somebody feel discredited? Did somebody feel shamed? And if that is the place, then we go to that and back out away from the reactions and get to what actually is happening there. Yes? Oh! Oh my goodness. Yeah. Yes. Right. 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 Yes. Yeah. Thank you for the word. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah, when somebody goes into abandonment panic, they do the very thing that's going to chase the other person away and terrify them or make them mad or put them down. And so being able to really slow down that cycle and work on it. Rejection is huge, because rejection is the rupture of the interpersonal bridge.
Well, the
more
reason
shame.
it's not on the
Yeah.
diagram, there's a reason for that, is because it's a reaction to the shame
Right.
that we're diagramming. The shame is the box in the middle,
Right.
and we haven't documented that yet.
And
We're not actually going to do that, but that's where we're
trying to
caught.
figure out what happened. Yeah.
The feelings of abandonment, rejection, those
Yeah.
are the shame
There's
feelings.
questions.
Isolation, incompetence, those are all related to shame. And people will spend a lot of time exploring the reactions to shame. You get this a lot with eating disorder. The whole shame issue becomes about, I was bad, I ate something, I was good, I didn't eat anything.
Yeah.
And you're missing the point, which is the shame itself. They're keeping you focused on the eating, which is a reaction to shame, rather than on the shame. And so our work is about get to the shame. And
when
we'll
it's,
show that.
And when
Yeah.
it's a couple, it's really about figuring out there are subtle misattunements, the raising of an eyebrow, or somebody just kind of looking away instead of making eye contact. Very subtle misattunements that can be so profoundly triggering. And yeah, there was a
So
question.
we don't want to do a
Yeah.
lot of questions now.
Okay.
Maybe one more, but
One
we
more,
need
and
to.
then we'll do it later.
Yes, definitely.
Yes,
They go
especially
all over
with
the place.
with a
Yeah.
trauma couple, partners can switch roles. The pursuer becomes the withdrawer. The withdrawer becomes the pursuer. Or you get pursue. And with this in a family or a couple, partners trade off, and it's amazing. And it's like to be able to have this as a map is helpful, and sometimes I'll bring it out in a session.
We share
and I'll
this with
say,
our clients, yeah.
and I'll put a sticky over the middle, so I'll say, I don't know what happened, but something happened in the middle here. I don't know what it was, but then this happened and this happened. We talk about the whole thing, and I'm like, what? Can you guys help me figure out who felt something? And then I'll pull off the sticky and I'll say, was it shame? And they're like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize it. So it's helpful as a psychoeducation. So I would love to do the
Did you want to move to the other one, the other slide, after reassessment, or are we going to the session?
I'd like to go to the couple session
Okay,
at this
we'll talk
point.
the other one.
Yeah. So can I have my volunteer couple come up? And if everybody would just take a deep breath for a minute. And this is a couple that I worked with a couple years ago. But this was, I think, a third or fourth session. And okay. Okay.
Are you abandoning me already?
I'm going to abandon her right away.
We need a second husband.
When I
We
saw
got
the
to.
size of the script, I realized I'm not going to have enough time.
It's going to go pretty fast. How
looking for
Yeah.
how long?
person.
How
Who
long
wants
do you
to
have?
come up?
It's going to be pretty quick.
It's
Yeah.
about
It's
20
about
minutes.
well, maybe 20 at the most.
Yeah.
20 would be the max.
Okay.
Then I'd have to disappear like a pumpkin.
Okay,
Okay.
we'll do it till 20 and then we'll stop. Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead. It's
All right.
too late to pick
Great.
somebody else.
All right, great. So what I want to say is each person brings their own shame history into the couple. And I'm tracking where the shame shows up between the couple. I'm watching for cues, posture, somatic reactions, reactive responses in place where one reaches and the other does not see the reach. That may be a current shaming in the cycle. I'm also looking for the shame freeze, which in this particular couple shows up in a surprising way. Oh, sure. Thank you. Is that good? Yep. Okay, so hi guys.
Hi.
Hi.
So, welcome back. So, I'm really happy to see you. And what do you two remember since the last session? Oh, you're the green one. Yeah.
Following the script.
Yeah.
Last week at the session, I had a glimmer for just a moment. I saw not the little boy, but the man. I saw him as a man for just a moment.
Oh, wow. And how did that feel?
Incredible. I felt hope, like it's been so hard and so long, like maybe it's even worth it. When he stopped laughing and just talked to me, well, I could see the man. For the first time, not the little boy, but the man. I had hope again, but then it was gone. During the week, he does that. He's always laughing.
How is it to hear how you affected her after last session?
Good. Really good.
Oh,
She's smiling. I like that. But then she gets mad because I laugh.
yeah. Well, it sounds like she gets mad sometimes. And when you laugh, and then last week you guys were working through this, the negative cycle, where there's no bad guy, and we were just noticing every cue about it so that we can understand, how you guys get into that negative cycle. And then we found a clue. And that we found the clue that when you laugh, something happens in her and she gets angry. And I thought that that was fascinating. So I'm really curious about that.
He's always laughing at me.
So when he laughs, how do you feel?
Belittled. He's so cruel.
Oh, wow. So tell me a little bit about when he laughs and you start to feel belittled, what is that like for you? Um, he's laughing, and 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 it sounds like you really don't like that. But when you laugh, what happens? What happens to you? How come you're laughing? This laughing thing that you do.
I've lost.
Oh, sorry. This laughing thing that you do, I think maybe it's a way that your nervous system figured out how to blow off steam. And what if it's just a way that you don't know how to respond to her, but you laugh because that's just, just what your nervous system learned to do.
Wow. I am lost, my dear.
Okay.
There.
Yeah. I think, next page.
Mm-hmm.
So we're here.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll go here. So he relaxes a little bit. And then I say, last week we talked about the choice you made to laugh instead of blowing up. You used to blow up with her. You get really loud and blow up. But you learned to laugh as a way to protect her. And then we discovered that it's something that you learned to do in your family when you were a little kid, that you would laugh when things got uncomfortable in your biological family, and it helped your family get past difficult places. But now you're all grown up, and you're a man, and you have a family of your own now.
I just can't stop laughing.
Yeah, it's just in your nervous system. That's the way you learn to blow off steam. And,
It's like a pot
yeah,
boiling.
uh-huh. So that's a great image. A pot is boiling inside you. Can you tell me more?
There's a pot boiling, and sometimes the top blows off.
Wow, it sounds like a lot of pressure. And it sounds like you learned to use this laughter to let off the steam so that the pot doesn't have to boil over. And you use this laughter to keep the top on because you don't want the pot to blow off.
Yeah.
Well, it makes sense to me. So can you help me figure out something in this cycle? I'm trying to figure out where the pressure is coming from. So I'm going to check for you. Oh, back with you. When you hear her anger and when you see her face upset or she yells at you, what happens inside you? Where does the pressure come from?
I just get mad.
Of course you do. She is mad and you don't know why, and you don't know why it happened. And so maybe you start to feel, I don't know, maybe embarrassed? Yeah. And it sounds a little like the cycle that when you think there's something she's wanting from you and you know, no matter how hard you try, you can't do it, and you feel like you failed, you feel embarrassed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did you know that he felt embarrassed?
No. I had no idea.
So when he laughs, what is it like in your world?
I feel belittled. It's so cruel. Not trusting.
And it sounds like you think he's laughing at you, so maybe it's not even safe anymore.
Not safe. Not a good dad. Not a good husband.
Wow. So you feel not safe, and at the same time you want to reach out to him to ask him to be safe, to be a better dad to your kids, so you get angry and you start shouting louder and louder and louder because you're trying to reach him and you're trying to reach out to him and you want to let him know how upset you are.
I want him to be my partner. I want to be a team, raising the kids together.
And when she yells at you because she's scared and she needs you, but that comes into your world and you feel embarrassed. And what happens to you?
I never know what to say.
Wow. Wow. So you want her to not be upset, and you don't know how to make things better. You don't know how to comfort her, and you now feel shame that you don't know what to do. So this is an organic process, you two. This is a very organic process, and we're figuring it out together. There's something created between two people who are desperately trying to get their attachment needs met, and doing it in a process that is triggering the other person. And there's a much deeper process at play here. We marry the person who's going to poke us in that very painful spot, because that can be the person who can actually help us heal that spot. And sometimes that spot is a shame spot. So for you, what you really want when you get so angry is you're trying to reach out and connect with him.
Yes, I want to be partners in marriage, in connection.
And for you, she knocks on your door and you've got your door closed and she's expecting you to be there, but you didn't learn how to connect in your family, so you don't know what to do, so you just feel embarrassed. So you feel embarrassed, you have shame, and you get more shame around the shame around the shame because you really don't know what to do. And when you feel shame, it is so painful because shame is the most shameful, painful feeling. And people either pull away, they withdraw, or they attack the other person. And, you know, at which point she gets angry with you. You try to cheer her up. That's where you let the pressure off through the laughing. But in her world, it's not safe because you're laughing. And you don't know what to do because you never learned how to talk about feelings. You just never learned. What does it touch in you when you hear this?
Compassion, caring. Well, when he was a kid, his dad would yell at him, and he would be in his room crying, and his mother would just close the door and walk away.
Your mother would just walk away and leave you there in the room crying?
Yes.
And close the door even. Wow. You were all alone with all those big feelings and you were just a little kid, and she left you all alone. All by yourself, and you needed your mother's comfort, and you needed your love after your father yelled at you. Wow, but you were left alone. So you got shame from your father's horrible yelling, and you were not protected by your mother, so you had to hold all those feelings in, which is doubly shaming. So you had shame and you had sadness maybe. And what are you hearing? What are you understanding? That what was it like to have to deal with all those feelings when you were alone?
I don't know. I don't have words.
You don't have to have words. You don't have to have words. Sometimes there just aren't any words.
I don't even know why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling now.
Of course. Of course. Your tears are really welcome here. Can you tell her that you don't even know why you're crying?
I don't know.
When he cries, I don't know what to do now. When he cries like this, what do I do?
Can you share your compassion? Can you share how touched you are? You don't have to be, you can tell him that he doesn't have to be alone in his shame anymore, that you're here with him.
I'm here. I feel your pain. I understand more now. You don't have to be in shame anymore.
I'm sad, but I'm not alone anymore.
I'm here with you now.
And there's so much shame and grief, and the two of you are repairing this bridge so beautifully. It really touches my heart. And you're making eye contact and you're being with each other. This is a moment to connect with each other, to let the shame and the aloneness heal through the bridge that you're building together. This is the healing gift you actually have for each other, and you're giving it to each other in this moment.
I'm not used to feeling like this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Beautiful. How does it feel?
I've waited a long time for this connection. I'm sorry I didn't understand sooner.
Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. Deep breath, everybody. Thank you, guys. I'll give you homework. Let's give them a hand.
Give us homework.
We had lived. That
Your
wasn't in
homework is to, your homework
Yeah,
is
lived
to,
it.
yeah, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Yeah. So what was it like? Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, for staying enrolled and not abandoned.